decided to do it. So that's probably why I'm the last person. I did it today because my grandma's birthday is coming up. Sorry, I'm already about to cry. And if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be saved. So I'm doing it in memory of her. He told me to try to take up 30 minutes, and I don't even want to do 5. So I'm probably going to rush through this, but I'll try my best. So how I started off was with a mom who was 19, and my dad was in his younger 20s when they had me. They didn't even really know each other very well. They only met at work. I think they knew each other like 3 months when she got pregnant with me. Neither of them wanted children, and 3 months into my mom's pregnancy was when they split up. So my dad instantly denied that I was his, and my mom, being 19, wanted to be a 19-year-old, so we moved in with her parents, who basically raised me the first 2 years of my life. I think for the first 2 years, my grandmother basically was like my mom. My grandpa helped, but he was also an abusive alcoholic, so he just kind of helped my grandma here and there. But when I was about 18 months old, my mom had met a guy that later became my stepdad, and he wanted to move me and her out of my grandparents' house and try to be a good man to her. And so my mom had never really gotten the chance to know me or cared to know me. So instantly she looked at me like a paycheck and was like, well, if we're gonna move out, I can get child support for Amanda. So she filed for child support, and my dad wanted a DNA test to prove I was his, and it came back I was. So they basically told my dad, you can fight for visitation rights, or you can just pay child support and sign your rights away. And he had gotten married, and the woman he was married to was told that, I'm not sure what was wrong with her, but that she probably wouldn't be able to have children of her own. So she told him, well, if we're gonna pay child support, and we know she's yours, let's go ahead and get visitation rights. So at that age, I don't remember much, because I was only 2, but I went from living with my grandparents as my parents for 2 years to living with my mom and her boyfriend full-time, and then seeing my dad and my stepmom, and being told they're all my parents, but I don't know any of them. So my grandma said that was kind of rough for a while. My memories didn't really start till I was about 4 or 5, and I look back and I do remember good, happy things here and there, mainly when family was around, because when family was around, it was a show, so it was happy. But most of it was not good. I don't want to go into a lot of what happened, but just as an example, by the time I was probably 7 or 8, I had been called probably every name that you can think of that you would call your worst enemy as not a Christian, the B word, all kinds of things. And to me, that was just normal. My parents have anger issues. They are bipolar, one of them schizophrenic. They both were addicts, so they just took their frustrations out on me. I was told that my mom had, now I don't know if there's any truth to this, but that she had 2 abortions before she had me, and the only reason she had me is because the doctor told her if she had another one that it could ruin her chances in the future, so that's the only reason I was born. I was told when I was like 7 or 8 that they wanted me to just go get hit by a car on my way to the school bus. So just a lot of feeling at a very young age like I wasn't wanted, being told all the time that I wasn't wanted. The only person that was really there for me was my grandma. My grandma was also going through a divorce because she'd been married for over 30 years to my grandfather, who was abusive. So she kind of had to run away to another state to get away from him. So for a while, I didn't really even have her. So my dad basically, out of all 4 of my parents, my stepdad was not abusive. He was, and still is, the kind, gentle one. I think he's seen what I went through and felt bad for me. And that's who I spent majority of my time with because he was the stay-at-home parent, my mom. And so going over there, I just heard a lot of choking and beating and yelling and cussing and just like battleground, walking on eggshells everywhere. So my stepmom, not trying to make excuses for her, but I think she just took her frustrations out on me because she was also going through a lot with my dad. And then when I was 8, they finally did have a baby after being told and tried for 8 years. They finally had one. So this was their miracle baby, and it's not his fault. God love him. But being told you're the mistake and not wanted your whole life, and then you have a miracle brother come along, you know, of course you're gonna feel like, I don't know, competition or like you're not good enough. So I always just try to strive for my parents' affection and attention the good way, and I never really got it. But I was happy because I had a brother at both of my houses who I kind of looked at like my own kids. I was protective of them because of all the turmoil that always was going on in the fighting. So I remember many times my dad getting drunk and beating on my stepmom, and I would have to put my brother in bed with me and cover his ears with a pillow so he wouldn't hear it and just kind of protect him. But they kept me, I think I grew up very quickly at a young age, and they kept me busy and they made me happy because they actually loved me and wanted to spend time with me, and I was their protector. So God gave me them also with my grandma. I was about 16 or 17 when I stopped talking to my dad for a while. His wife had written me a very, very vicious note, and I think I still have it somewhere. At the very end of saying all this horrible stuff, she said, go ahead and cry if you want. Your dad cries when he gets his check and sees child support's been taken out and realizes a condom could have taken care of this. So at that point, I just had cut them out, and I was 17. I was working. I was technically able to graduate early, but I knew at 17 I couldn't get a full-time job, and I would have to live with my mother, and I wouldn't have school. So I went my senior year just for extra credit classes because I did not want to be stuck at home with her. So I graduated at 18, and within a year, I had moved out and had my own apartment. I was just ready to get out of there. That's when I think God was really kind of starting to speak to me, just because my grandmother had been divorced for a couple years now. She had found God, and seeing and hearing all the stuff the stuff she went through, it's horrible. And she never called herself a victim. She always called herself a survivor. And seeing how she gave God credit kind of opened my eyes. And she got saved in a Pentecostal church that my aunt and uncle were going to. And they kept inviting me, and I kept saying no. When and if I ever went to church as a kid, I would go with my stepmom here and there to Catholic church, and Catholic church is a lot different than our church. I'll just put it that way. So I never really clicked with it. I didn't understand any of it. So I blew it off for a while. But when I had my own apartment, I was the only one of my friends at that age that had my own place. So my friends came to my house to party. So, I wasn't a parent. My house was free reign. And so my friends would come over, and we just were always drinking, partying, doing things that we should have not been doing. And I started, even though I was happy to not be with my parents, I could tell I was slipping into a depression. And my friends would leave their alcohol at my house because they were underage. They couldn't take it home with them. And I noticed that through the week, I worked first shift, and when I'd get off of work, I would just drink all night because I had nothing else to do. And within time, I started realizing I felt like I was turning into my dad, and I didn't want that life. And I had a desk job with one of those old radios with the antennas. One of the only stations that came in was K-Love. And God knows, I know God knows each of us individually, and He knew that's how He could speak to me, because worship music, I'm so thankful I don't have a good voice, because I'd be up there bawling if I was on stage with every song. So it just speaks to me, and God used K-Love to save me. So within probably a week or two, I kind kind of noticed, like, wait, it took me a while to even notice they're singing about God, because I had grown up in Catholic church, so I thought that's how godly music sounded, and then I heard this music and I was like, what is this? So, probably about 2 weeks into listening to K-Love, I went and bought, they call them WOW CDs. They're like a mixture of Christian CDs that are popular, and started listening to it. And I had a boyfriend at the time who lived with me, and he started to see me change, and he didn't want nothing to do with it. He wanted to still party and go do things, and that kind of kept me away from it. So I was seeing God and hearing God and feeling God, but I still was fighting it. And then just one night I was having a party at my house, and I felt like I was almost having the movies where, like, you see somebody just sitting there and everything around them's just going on, and they're just in a trance. And I had alcohol in my hand. I wasn't drinking. I was just miserable. And I went and shut myself and locked myself in my bedroom, and I just cried. And I gave my life to God that night. And I just prayed, like, God, if you want me to go to church, I'll go. But I didn't have my license. I needed somebody to pick me up. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I was like, I need sleep. Help me to get to sleep. And I just remember falling asleep on the floor and waking up the next day in time without an alarm for church. My aunt picked me up, and I went to her Pentecostal church with her, which Pentecostal and Catholic church are totally different. I was not aware of that. So my grandma went up and did a praise report. She said, we've been praying for my granddaughter for months and months. I did not know this, but her and my aunt have been requesting prayer for me at church for months that I would come, because they knew kind of what I had gone through. A lot of my family were kept in the dark about my life until I was old enough to finally talk to them about it. But they were 2 people that I trusted, so they knew, and they knew that I needed God. So they stood up and did a prayer report that I was there, which was embarrassing, but it made me cry. And then my grandma went up and got prayed for, and she said, come up there and hold my hand and get prayed with. And I was like, oh, so they just put their hands on me, and I was freaked out at first. I don't do stuff like that in Catholic church, so I was just stunned, scared, and nervous, and I don't know what happened, but I just buckled and fell to my knees and just kind of gave my heart to God all over again with other people praying over me at the altar. And from then, I've just kind of been saved. I was 19 when I got saved. The church that I got saved at, they needed a teen teacher, so I became their teen teacher, and did that for quite some time. And God's brought me to different types of churches and throughout the years and stuff. And I've always helped with children's ministry. So I know that what I went through was so that I could help children, because I've had so many kids, you can just tell when they don't come from a good home. At least I can, because I had that experience. So I'm able to kind of just love on them more and be the person to them that my grandma was to me. So as a kid, obviously, I would cry. I've looked back at journals because I loved. My escape was like creative writing. So I love writing poetry, I love writing short stories. And I've looked at journals from when I was 10 or 11 years old, and they sound very suicidal. And I didn't realize what suicide was at that age. I just knew nobody wants me, I'm better off in heaven, just God take me. So that's all I wrote about in these journals. And when I found them as an adult, it just hit me. So I've gone through counseling, and I think God knew I wanted a lot of children. I have 4. I would have more if I could. He knew I was going to help in children's ministry, so I went through hard things so that I know I can help those that are going through hard things also. And then I went to a Holy Spirit class. That's where I really got to know Mike. At our old church, we had Holy Spirit classes, and we just kind of learned more about, like Mike says, when you have God and Jesus, you have to have the Holy Spirit also. And I just wanted to learn about that. The second they mentioned it, I was like, I'm going. I want to hear this. God has always laid hard things on me to try to tell people. I think it's discernment. I don't remember the name of the gifting, but it's hard for me because I don't like being mean to people. So I was like, I got to learn about all this. And so it took me a while to...
Prophecy.
Prophecy. I've never heard that. Maybe. I've just been told, like, I could just meet somebody and I'm like, I can tell if I need to say something to them or if God's leading me to say something. A lot of times I stop myself, and that's quenching the spirit, which I need to stop. But I just knew that there was something in me that was going on that I wanted to learn more about. So for probably the first half, and it's like a 12-week long thing, probably the first 5-6 weeks, I just sat back and watched. And then my grandma passed away, the one that raised me, and I was like, I really need this now. So I went up. Before we would get prayed for, we would have our own individual prayer time. And during my own individual prayer time, I'm one of those people, I don't know if maybe any of you guys do this, but when I pray, I struggle thinking, I pray the same thing all the time. God's not listening to me, I'm just boring. But specifically that night, I had closed my eyes and I was off on my own where nobody was at, and I was praying to myself too. I didn't even say this out loud. I just prayed that God would set me on like a narrow path and just line that path with trees so that the trees would block me from getting off of it. And that I would, at the end, I just kept picturing the path, and then I seen this light coming down from heaven, so that would be the end of my journey. And I just kept picturing this as I'm praying. Well, I got brave and got prayed over that night. And I was told specifically from people who didn't really even know me, because this is the first time I've ever really shared my testimony. A lady told me that God wanted me to write children's books. And she gave me the title of the children's book. She told me what they were supposed to be about. And so I instantly started on that, which was amazing. It was almost therapeutic to write for kids. And then right before they stopped praying for me, both the pastor of the church and another lady said, I keep seeing this path with trees on both sides. Does that mean anything to you? And I just started crying. I was like, yeah, that means God's actually listening to me when I pray. Like, I didn't think he actually listened. So I know he did, but you're just kind of, you're like, oh, I'm boring after so long. So that was just confirmation to me. And at that point, I just kind of dove into the Holy Spirit class. And when I pray over people, I almost see like a vision, like a movie playing. And it does not make sense to me like over 90% of the time. But I'm sure to the pastor and that lady that seen the pathway with the trees, it did make sense to them. And by them speaking it out, it confirmed something in me. So I realized I have to do that too. And I just started growing in the Holy Spirit class. And then when Mike moved here, we followed. We love Mike and his preaching. And my husband, when we first got together, didn't have a very good background either. He had very loving parents, but his dad was an alcoholic also. And so the most he knew about God or church was the GD word and things like that. And so when we got together, I had already been saved and had children. I had Adam and Jessa at the time. And I had told him that it was my heart's desire to have a Christian husband. And so what he says now is that he played church because he knew that's what I wanted. And I bought it for a while, and we got married and had 2 more kids. And it wasn't until we started coming here and he really heard Mike's preaching that he got saved too. So it took some time, but God has answered so many of my prayers. There's just no way that anybody can tell me he's not real. I'm so thankful that after everything, all the stuff I've heard, that I'm where I'm at now, and I have a good